On today's show, Christopher Hewitt and I share plumbing tips during listener Q&A. And later, my guest, Steve Jordan, preservation specialist, author of the Window Sash Bible, and longtime contributing editor to Old House Journal, talks about his lifetime in the building trades and offers helpful do-it-yourself advice, too. But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House, and I am the host of True Tales from Old Houses. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Here we are. This is the last episode of Season 5. The final episode of every season always feels sort of like the last day of school to me. On one hand, I'm happy, I'm excited to be on a break, but then on the other hand, I already miss you. I've said it before and I'll say it again, hosting this podcast is truly my favorite job. I piece together my living doing various old house related work, but none of it compares to the fun of interviewing guests, answering your questions, and producing the show. Thank you for being such a supportive audience, and while I certainly benefit from enjoying this job, True Tales from Old Houses has always been about you and for you. So keeping that in mind, there are a couple of new things on the website for you that I want to mention. The first is a guest intake form. If you think you'd make a great guest on True Tales from Old Houses, I invite you to fill out an intake form. In the past, I had a guest inquiry form that was in a survey-style format, and it worked just so-so, really. If you filled out something in the past and you did not hear back from me, please don't hesitate to complete the new guest intake form. Normally, if you don't hear back from me, it's not personal, it's technical, and we've solved those problems on the back end. I'm always looking for guests who live in non-traditional spaces, and October is also when we tell our lighthearted ghost stories, and those episodes are always a lot of fun. You might have a story to tell that we've never even considered, so don't hesitate to fill out the form. Over on the website, you'll also find a listener survey. At the end of every season, I offer a survey because I like to find out what you enjoyed during the season and what you'd like to hear more about in the future. Here on the show, we have always taken your ideas to heart, and everything from tech to guests is fine-tuned based in part on your ideas. So if you would take a few minutes of your time to fill out a survey, that would be great. And even if you filled out one before, you are welcome to do it again because the questions change a little every season. Now, the final announcement I have for today is a big one. On November 6th, True Tales from Old Houses will be traveling to the Hudson Valley to record 2 episodes in front of a live audience. And you could be part of that audience. We'll be recording at Stony Ford, the beautiful historic home of Susan and William Brinson of House of Brinson. They'll be my guests for one episode, and the second episode will feature the endearing and always hilarious Daniel Cantor. This is a full event. The tickets will include a meet and greet with all of us, a house tour of Stony Ford, light food and drink, and of course the recording of 2 episodes of True Tales from Old Houses. If you cannot be there, we are trying to add a Zoom component to the event, and of course the 2 shows that we record will be published on their regularly scheduled release dates during the season. These episodes will be for everyone, in person or not. Now, I've never done anything like this before, so I am equal parts excited and a little terrified, quite frankly. I'm super grateful to Susan and Will for opening up Stony Ford for this event. We're not talking about a stadium here. Stony Ford seats about 30 guests. So for now, save the date, and tickets will go on sale Monday, September 6th, and I hope you can join us. For more information about the intake form, the survey, and the live audience event, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. For today's Q&A, I asked Christopher Hewitt back to help me answer a listener question. He was just here for a full interview on the last episode, which was episode number 58. So welcome back, Christopher.
Hi, Stacy. Glad to be back.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with me. I've had so much fun this entire season just having friends back to answer the listener Q&A questions. It's been great. So I appreciate you coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I could talk old house stuff all day long.
Well, then you're in the right spot. All right. Are you ready to answer today's listener question?
Let's do it.
The question is, what are some of your best plumbing tips? And I assume this is from a DIY perspective because neither you nor I are plumbers.
Okay. So from a DIY perspective, I have a lot of tips from design to products to like installation, troubleshooting and maintenance is probably like the easiest one. You just want to make sure you keep your drains clear and clean. Hair seems to be like probably one of the biggest ones. Even if you put brand new plumbing in, like ours was clogged in like 6 months. So I use this tool called the Drain King. It's kind of like a pressure washer for your pipes. It just screws onto your faucet. That gives you the water source and it kind of blasts your drains clean.
Oh, that's super interesting. I use this little thing, super cheap. It's plastic. I don't have all new plumbing, so I guess I should offer that. I don't use any of the chemicals because I'm afraid they'll just eat through my pipes and then disintegrate anything that's there. So it's like a little plastic thing, and I actually stick it as far down in the drain as I can and then pull it all the way up, and then it just pulls all that nasty hair
all the gross
out.
stuff.
Yeah. I keep wanting to do a video on it, and then I'm thinking, I can't do a video of this. I can't show people the nasty stuff I pull out of my drain, but that thing's super handy. But that's a good point. How do you do and this is just, I guess, a general question, so we're just going to answer it based on, I guess, what we want to talk about for plumbing. But how do you do anything special in the kitchen?
So for the kitchen, a lot of people have a garbage disposal and they put everything in it. And so I like to keep that to a minimum. If you get a few food particles, but don't use that as your main sole means of disposing of food waste, just, get it in the trap, throw it away. But you grind all it up, it ends up in your pipe somewhere. So a little bit's okay probably, but I don't like to do that for, a bulk of things that seem to accumulate in your sink.
Right. Yeah. I always tell people it's in case food goes down there, not so you can put food down there.
it's not your in-house composter, right?
Right. Exactly. So what if you have a plumbing problem? Say something, this is actually a timely question because I spent at least half of my entire day putting a new toilet in. So what if something goes wrong? How do you handle that from a plumbing standpoint?
So I try to know, becoming familiar with your house, know where all of your water shutoffs are, because, if you have a leak or something happens, you may not have a shutoff right there at that fixture. So you're going to need to run to the basement really quick and go find where that's at. So I like to know where those are at, all the water shutoffs, tag those, so you kind of know what's going to what. And then, just try to assess what's going on. Is it a leak? Do you not have any pressure? I know, sometimes you just get junk in your pipes, and, I've had this happen twice. It's really weird, like where you had water coming out of your faucet and it just stops. And it's weird. Had like debris in the pipes that either like breaks loose, lime scale, or we had some new plumbing done and it was actually a piece of wood. And so it made its way all the way to the faucet, to the aerator at the end, and it clogged it up and I had very little water coming out. And so I screwed the aerator off, and by chance, oh, hey, a piece of wood, cleaned it out.
Interesting.
It's something super simple, but if you didn't think of that, you'd be calling a plumber and paying at least a service fee.
Right. So something interesting happened, or what I noticed interesting in this house when we first moved in, is that the plumbing was so old that things like the toilet didn't have a water shut off. The only way to turn the water off at the toilet was to go all the way to the basement and shut all of that water off to the entire house. And I just figured every single toilet has a water shut off, right? And
you would think.
Yeah, we got stuck. We had a big leak, and something blew off the back of the tank, not that regulated how tall or how high the water should get in the back of the tank. And it just blew off, and it just water everywhere. It came down through the kitchen. And it was funny because we could hear it. I was actually in the kitchen and I was thinking, why is the water so loud? Like why is that toilet flushing so loud? And then it just hit me all of a sudden. I thought, oh, that is not normal. And I sent one of my kids to run upstairs. They're like, shut off the water. So yeah, I ran down to the basement. And so you're so right about knowing where to do that. And I don't know, this is something that we do at our house. And I don't know if you do it where you are, but when I go on vacation, I normally shut the water off.
We do the same thing. I go to the main meter in the basement and shut it off. Wintertime, summertime, because I don't want to come home to a flooded Michigan basement.
Yeah. And I've heard, some people have said that's a little bit overkill, but especially you have cold weather there, and so do we. And I'm always afraid that some pipe will burst and, yeah, like you said, come home to a big disaster. Yeah, exactly. Let's see. What other plumbing tips? Towels. Have lots of towels handy. That's based on my toilet experience today, by the way. I don't know. Do you have any other tips for plumbing? I think becoming familiar with what you have is probably the biggest one.
And I think too, if you're remodeling, I think it goes back to the design too. So know your locations. If you're going back to to remodel your bathroom, let's say, knowing where all your fixtures are going to mount, your shutoffs, you want to be able to anchor those. So you may want to put in an extra piece of a 2x4. I know some people will come in and sheathe the inside of their bathroom with plywood. So if you have to hang towel racks or a hinged mirror or mount the sink, you have something to do that too, because you may not know exactly, unless you lay it out really precise, you won't know where to put some, a couple extra studs or pieces of wood to screw to, like with your sink, like a pedestal sink.
Right. Interesting.
Knowing those locations and, the mounting provisions, fixtures, shutoffs, and even interferences too, right? So, I saw a good post the other day talking about shutoffs. And so if you have a 6-inch or 8-inch baseboard, you probably don't want to put your shutoff right where the trim cap or the escutcheon is going to hit, like right at the top of it, especially if it's tile. Now you have these uneven surfaces. It doesn't fit right. So you want to make sure that that pipe comes out of the wall above your baseboard.
Okay.
And just, making sure where things are and there's no interferences. Even like your shower. I'm afraid of leaks, water leaks, like you were talking about. I opt for like exposed shower kits, like the rain heads, because at least there's minimal plumbing in the wall. There's still plumbing, but the rest of that plumbing that comes to the shower head, at least it's in the shower. So if you do spring a leak, at least it's going into a drain and draining out of your house, not going into a wall cavity. But on the flip side of that too, if you have a shower door that swings in, you've got to know how far that head is coming out into the shower so your door doesn't swing in and hit it. Goes back to logistics. Next thing you know, you're trimming the pipe and your shower head is, 8 inches off the back wall because your door is hitting it. And that's
right.
not optimal either. So,
yeah, I asked the right person to come and answer this question. You're getting into it a lot more than I probably would have with anybody else. You mentioned a word, escutcheon. I know that as flange. Is that the same thing?
Yep, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Alabama, we call it a flange.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure because I will probably get a strongly worded email saying that it's an escutcheon, not a flange. So I just wanted to make sure those were two things. Those two things were the same.
Sure. It all fits.
It all fits. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back and answering this question. It was great to see you again and talk with you.
Sure. Glad to help, Stacy.
Yeah, I know we'll see each other again soon. So bye.
Bye.
Now it's your turn. All season I've been asking you, what is the weirdest or most surprising thing you ever found in your old house? And here are a few of your answers. Barely Bungalow over on Instagram described this experience, and she wrote, as a kid, we had an 1860s house, and during a renovation, a pile of women's garters fell out of the ceiling. Now that's funny and definitely surprising. Emily found a newspaper from 1878 in her old house, and that's neat, but what's interesting is that her house wasn't actually built until 1928. So we wonder who is saving that issue and why. And the final answer of this season comes from the Robinsons. They found a double-seated outhouse. A double-seated outhouse really takes that family togetherness to the next level, doesn't it? Throughout the season, it has been so much fun to hear your answers to the question, what's the weirdest or most surprising thing you ever found in your old house? And now it's time for a new topic. The question for next season is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house? Or what's the most challenging thing about living in an old house? Visit the True Tales from Old Houses website and submit your answer by voicemail or email. For a voicemail, click on the mic icon in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see it on your phone or the computer. And please answer in a complete sentence. If you want to send an email, just tap Contact in the top menu bar. Your privacy is important, and I will not share your messages without your permission. So again, that new question is, what is your favorite thing about living in an old house, or what is the most challenging thing about living in an old house? True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Window Course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Window Course is a step-by-step, do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to successfully restore your historic wood windows. It's self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need to, and there are several price points to fit your needs and budget. Now, I'm pretty sure you've heard already, but if you have not, I have something exciting to tell you. Scott introduced a new infrared paint remover available only at the Craftsman blog, and he is calling it the first affordable infrared paint remover on the market. Of course, that's big news, but it gets better because if you sign up for the window course, you'll get an infrared paint remover shipped to you for free. The window course is offered with a money-back guarantee, and now it comes with an infrared paint remover too. And I've got a coupon code for you. Scott is offering True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales. My guest today is Steve Jordan. Steve has worked in the building trade since he was 15 years old and is now a preservation specialist who repairs and restores old historic windows and prepares window assessments and condition reports in Rochester, New York. He was the rehab advisor for the Landmark Society of Western New York for 6 years, an architectural conservator for Barrow Architecture for 4 years, and was a contributing editor for Old House Journal from 1998 through 2015. He is the author and co-author of several Old House resource books, including the Window Sash Bible.
Hi, Stacy. I'm Steve Jordan. I live in Rochester, New York, and I mostly repair old and historic windows for a living. Sometimes I write condition reports for an architectural firm, and I write papers and books about old house stuff.
It is so nice to meet you, Steve. You're a legend.
You know, I'm third tier famous, fourth tier famous. Okay, and that's mostly because I wrote for Old House Journal for so long. So people like you know who I am, but I think that's the extent of it.
Well, we'll get to that. I got a kick out of, on the intake form, I ask a question and it's something like, is there anything in particular you'd like to talk about? And your answer was, just a lifetime in the building trades, just a little something you'd like to talk about.
Yep.
But we'll get into your writing for sure, because you have had such a diverse work history, and that includes a lot of extensive writing. But first, I want to start with the fact that you grew up in rural West Tennessee, and I believe you graduated from Memphis State University with a degree in history, and then you completed Cornell University's graduate program in historic preservation. And now you say you are a preservation specialist. So what were your original plans with your degree, and how did they change?
That's a question that I will reflect on for the rest of my life. Okay, there were 10 years between my undergraduate and my graduate degree, and so when I went to Cornell, I expected or wanted much more building conservation training or knowledge than I had, and Cornell's more of a planning program, and so I got out. I got my first job and I realized how little I really knew. And so I would go to the library and check out 10 books a week and literally read every one of them, mostly about masonry and things like that, things I didn't have a good grip on. Okay. So I wanted to be an architectural conservator. And most of those people come out of Columbia or Penn and those programs. And so what I learned, I had to learn on my own. After my several years with the local nonprofit, I went to an architectural firm, and it was immensely wonderful. I learned something every day, and I worked there for several years, and that was the best training I had. But I wanted to do architectural conservation, and I have more or less.
Right. And you feel like your degree was mostly in planning? You mean like preservation planning for cities?
My degree was mostly in planning, and wash my mouth out with soap, but I don't have much interest in planning. I know it's necessary, all right? It's necessary, but I don't have much interest in it.
Right. So did you work in the historic preservation field as an academic for any length of time before you moved on to more of a hands-on position like you have now?
I worked for a nonprofit for about 6 years, and I was able to tailor that job to what I wanted to do. I was fortunate. And so what I would do is visit with homeowners and consult with them about setting priorities in their restoration work, okay? Then when I went to Barrow Architecture here, which is the local preservation firm, I would inspect a building with the principal or the owner of the firm on Fridays. And this was usually a building that needed grants. And then I would spend the rest of the week, or sometimes much longer, writing a condition report for granting purposes. All right. So that's 10 years at a desk, more or less. And then I had children and realized my wife was a school teacher, which is a bit imprisoning. So if anybody needed to pick up the kids or stay with the kids if they were sick, it was me. So I quit those jobs. I felt like they were more or less dead end, and started the window repair business. And I knew from the other jobs that it was needed because I got constant calls about it and had no one to refer.
Right.
And I knew how to do it because I've been working in old houses since I was a kid.
Right. Yeah. So tell us about that. You've been doing this since you were just a little one. So how did you get from that point to this point?
Well, my dad would sort of farm me out to all the old lady neighbors, all the widow women in the town, and they would have me paint their porches or maybe the gingerbread on their porches and by the time I was 14 years old, I was painting houses. All right. And I learned a great lesson from those very frugal widow women. All right. And that was, if I told them I wanted $1 an hour, they would tell me that was ridiculous. But if I told them I wanted $10 for an 8-hour day, they seemed to think that was okay. All right. So I learned really young, never to work by the hour and never tell anybody what you made. I did that. I got my first job with a professional painter when I was 15. I went to Memphis State, which is now the University of Memphis, I should say. And I put myself through college. It took me 5 years or so, painting for a contractor who worked exclusively on old homes in what in Memphis is the Central Garden District. Okay. It's a National Historic Landmark District now of old 1900 to 1930 homes. And in that job, I was able to learn things beside painting. I learned about basic remodeling. I learned about plaster, and I was there when plasterers ran cornices and did that kind of work. I saw my first grain a mantle, which graining is like really my great passion in life.
Do you do that? It's so gorgeous. I absolutely love it.
I can do that. I used to do a lot of it. I don't do much of it anymore, but I can. I want to write more about that.
I feel like I would like to visit you in Rochester and we could just spend a couple hours. I know you have nothing but time on your hands.
I have nothing to do. Well, I am getting old. I make time. I make time when it's necessary. Okay.
I was going to say, I would love to come over there and do some graining with you and have you show me your tricks, because I think it's such a fantastic and beautiful expression of art.
I do too. And one reason I don't pursue it or offer to do classes in it is because I never transitioned from oil-based materials to water-based materials. Okay. I never learned. I never took them seriously. And so most people want to use less toxic material, less smelling material.
Right. Yeah. Less VOCs generally.
So I went to Colorado after that. My wife was in college at Boulder, and I worked for a big paint company there. Then we left after a few years and went to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and that was the greatest struggle of my life. I enjoyed living there, but it was difficult. No matter how little you worked for, someone would do it for half. It was a difficult economic situation. While I was there, we rented a little house nearby, and I refinished furniture for people, whatever it took to make a living. So that's how I transitioned into all of this. In 1985, I decided to. Well, I had never seen the National Trust magazine, and I picked one up. I was in Arizona, and I picked one off of a newsstand, and I had never known that there was a program called Historic Preservation where you could actually go to college and get a degree. And I thought, this is perfect for me. So that's how I went into the Cornell program.
Okay. I thought you were talking about after you had your degree, and I thought, wait a minute, you didn't know about the magazine? What kind of education is Cornell offering?
No. Yeah, I had never seen one. And back then, the magazine, you subscribed to the magazine, you joined the National Trust. And every quarter you received a newspaper, which was for professionals. I missed that newspaper. Okay, that was nice. it had things in it that the general public would not be interested in, but was geared toward us.
Right, because you wanted to know every single little detail, right, of preservation and the trades.
Yeah. Well, it included training seminars and college programs and what was going on for professionals.
Interesting. So I have to go back just a little bit about painting because although, I mean, I want to find out all about you, but I'm wondering, because our listeners are such a group of DIYers and old house enthusiasts, do you have any pearls of wisdom that you learned from painting? I know you said you didn't transition from oil-based to water-based paints, but is there anything that could be helpful to us as we are painting?
Oh, that was in graining where I didn't transition.
In graining. Okay.
I certainly transitioned in architectural coatings from oil to latex, and I remember in the late 60s when I used my first latex house paint. I remember clearly. But I think, well, first of all, I read all of the Old House Facebook sites, and I have to say there's some terrible information provided on, and every now and then I'm tempted to butt in, but I'm just another name, and so that's just another opinion. So I typically don't. But I do have some strong opinions and tidbits, okay? And that's that although everyone seems to think oil paint is a thing of the past, and it is getting harder to buy, right? I disagree with that. I think that oil paint is almost a necessity for yesterday. A woman called me about painting all the thresholds in her house, right at the doors. And I said, oil, floor and deck enamel, oil. That's what you want on a threshold. I think it's better for doors, columns, banisters. Anywhere where there's hard use, I prefer oil paint. I prefer oil paint for window sashes, but I don't usually use it. Well, you like it, why do you not use it? And I don't usually use it because I don't think the next person will follow it with oil. And therefore, I'm creating a bit of a problem.
Yeah, you are, when you were saying that is exactly what I'm thinking about. I run into that problem here a lot because I also like oil paint. I lived in California for years and years where it was not available to me. No.
Yeah.
And when I came here, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. But you've brought up a good point. It's not just going to be me living in this house. And I am so concerned about my windows or my incredible staircase, somebody coming along. And right now I'm dealing with the incompatibility problem of latex over oil without a proper primer. And that will just happen again to another person. And so that's why I hesitate to use oil. But after using it, I can see why you would say that because it's incomparable. There is not a latex paint that compares to it. There are some that are close.
Yeah. Are you aware of the Genesee Country Museum?
I am. Yes. I haven't been yet. It's about, I think, an hour and 20 minutes from me.
Well, you should visit when they have a special weekend. Okay. But I've helped them with their paint colors for many years. Like you just said, they've had a lot of problems with the incompatibility between oil paints and latex paints. And that's one of the things I've helped them with over the years.
So with all of your experience, how did you decide or when did you decide that windows were going to be your primary focus? Because I know that you have your hand in a lot of different things as far as consulting wise, but a lot of people know you from your window work. So I'm just curious when you decided to specialize.
About 20 years ago, I left my job working at the architectural firm. Well, I didn't just quit. I worked part-time there and before I left. And I had plenty of work to do, whether it was painting or whatever. And the window work, I remember Friday afternoon having a beer with a friend of mine who's an old house carpenter, the best I know. And he said, "What are you going to do, Steve? You can't possibly make a living working on windows." Mm-hmm. And I thought, I think I can. And I have, and it's exploded on me. I turn down way more than I do, which is unfortunate, but I turn down a lot of work.
There are so many in our area, and I know that, there's a whole United States that doesn't have nearly the old house inventory that we have in this part of the country. But you're right. There are enough windows for every restoration professional, every DIYer, and more. So anybody who wants to get into that particular trade, there is room for you for sure.
You know what's also interesting these days is when I meet a couple of contractor friends on Fridays, and over the last couple of years, I've noticed that my customer base, of course, I'm getting old. I'm past retirement age, but my customer base is getting younger and younger and younger. And I'm inclined to think they'll never take that proposal. They'll never spend that much money. They'll never do this, but they do. Okay. And that's new to me. You know, I think for years, all my customers were middle-aged to retired, and now they seem to be younger. That's what I'm noticing. And I think they understand the value in it.
That gives me a lot of hope. That makes me feel very hopeful.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you just as a joke too, are they really younger or do they just look younger? Because I find the older I get, the younger I think people are, but they're really not that young.
I think the older I get, I find it impossible to gauge how old they are. Okay. But these are people in their 30s and early 40s.
Yeah, no, I just thought that was funny because I do the same thing. I'm like, I have no idea. You could be in high school, you could be in college, you could be 30. I don't know.
I know that.
All right. Well, you're also, as you mentioned before, a very prolific writer, and you were a contributing editor for Old House Journal, I think from 1998 to 2015. And one of your most popular books is the Window Sash Bible, which is an invaluable resource for anyone who's restoring original windows. When did you decide to write this book? Why did you think this was something that everyone needed?
I had some hand surgery and I couldn't work. And I read a lot, and I read a lot of technical stuff, and I didn't feel like there was a good step-by-step handbook available for that. Okay. So I started writing it thinking it would be 25 pages. Okay. And it just went on and on and on to like 140 pages. And if I were to write it over again, I guess I could write 300 pages. I don't know. And I would like to redo it, but I would write one chapter at a time. I just focus on the immediate, and I would write one chapter at a time. And it was just sort of a hobby, a preoccupation. I didn't know if anything would come of it, and it just exploded on me. And there you go. It's been very successful. I would like to put it out in a colored form, but that's just so expensive. And then I have to buy all the books, and you know how that goes. If you publish 1,000, it's this price, but if you publish 5,000, it's this price. And so if I do that, I'll store them at your house.
I'll tell you what, I do have room at my house to store your books, so we could probably work something out.
I live in a cracker box, so yeah, I have no room. But I buy this next book. I have to buy the copies.
Yeah, well, definitely. I'll make a little space for you in the basement. How's that?
Okay.
Up on a pallet to keep everything nice and dry. Now, you also wrote a book called Rehab Rochester, which was a sensible guide for old house maintenance, repair, and rehabilitation.
Yep.
And I know that you are currently rewriting that. So I'd like to know, why does a book like that need to be rewritten, and how has preservation changed over the years since you wrote that book?
That book I wrote in 1995, and I think it won an award from the Preservation League. But over the years, I haven't gone back to it many times, although I will occasionally get an inquiry about it from someone way out, maybe California or somewhere, which is amazing to me. I don't know how it got out there, because it was meant to be a local's resource. And I recently was asked, would you consider updating it? And I looked at it, read the whole book, and realized that it was just hopelessly out of date. And you would think, well, why? Isn't that pretty basic information? And it is. But here are some things. In 1995, I think I said, it's a bad idea to fasten a TV antenna to your chimney. Okay. I don't think we have many television antennas anymore.
Not in that way. No, for sure.
No. We made a mistake and included local phone numbers and local retailers where you might buy real plaster and things. Well, of course, now they're all gone or changed or whatever.
Sure.
I wouldn't do that again. Then I think one of the things that has been hard to rewrite is insulation and ventilation. Insulation has changed a lot. And so now fiberglass and cellulose insulation is challenged by the efficiency of foam insulation. Okay. And although I think foam insulation can be a terrible idea retrofitted into an older home, I think you have to talk about it and give the pros and cons and compare all of those. That's what I've been working on most recently. And I have 2 or 3 other people who are helping me review this and rewrite it. But I don't have an end date because my beta readers are a little slow to get back to me.
Is there any architectural history that you're updating that was in the original book that you're adding now?
Yeah. We started the first book off with the colonial. And we were very clear that, yes, colonial is the first architecture in the United States, but we don't have any here, okay? No true colonial architecture. Well, it occurred to me that was wrong, and I started it out this time with the Seneca Native American longhouse. And although there are no original longhouses left, I think that was the appropriate place to start. And there is a great reproduction south of here near Victor.
Yeah.
And then since it was 1995, we didn't have ranch houses, mid-century modern. So we will add that.
Yeah. It's funny that that's now historic, right?
Yeah.
That was just the house I grew up in. It wasn't that wasn't historic.
Yeah, it was a house I grew up in too, and it's taken me my whole life to appreciate them. Okay, but I do now. Like it took me 20 years after getting out of graduate school to appreciate modern urban architecture, and now I do. But it took a long time.
It is interesting. You'll see that like brutalist architecture or something, and it just think, oh, that's terrible. But then you get to understand why it came about, and then it starts to be sort of intriguing, and then you see it where you go and you point it out, and it becomes really interesting.
Exactly right.
Ultimately, we sort of choose to live in a structure, well, as old house owners, often, if we're lucky and privileged enough, we get to choose the house we live in based on what we like. But there's all different types of architecture out there that's worth looking at and understanding and appreciating, almost like art, maybe, even if it's not something you'd want to spend a whole lot of time in.
Yeah, right. I don't live in a house. I don't live in the style house I would like to live in. I'm in a 1960 split level house because I needed a house when I bought it. But at this point, well, I always thought that I would buy another house more appropriate to what I do for a living. But now we're going through this real estate explosion. And so I think it's going to force me to stay here.
I understand that. So, I mean, what is your favorite house? What would you like to live in if you just got to make a wish and poof, it was there?
Oh, absolutely a bungalow.
At this stage in your life, would you want a project house or would you want a turnkey house?
Oh, I would want, a project house. That can mean a lot of things, but I would want a project house.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't want a project house that was falling down. Okay. Yeah. But a project house.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. Something with some things for you to do and some things that you might want to change or fix or whatnot. But yeah, exactly. That's what I meant by project house. All right. So I want to turn to some window questions, if you could. I had some people ask me some questions on Instagram sometimes, and I know what I would do, but I thought, you know what? I have this opportunity to talk to you, someone who's into this all the time, and maybe you would offer some different or better advice than I could. So I just have a few of those, if you're ready. You ready?
I'm ready. Yes.
So the first one, I want to know if it is a myth or the truth. Okay. So what I've heard and what a lot of people have heard and what they asked me too is that after the glazing putty is painted, you finished your sash, you've glazed your putty, it's cured, and you've painted it, and you've sort of lapped onto the glass a little bit. Most of us, or many of us, have heard that if you use a razor blade method to tidy up your paint lines, that the paint will no longer be waterproof, that moisture will seep behind it and then compromise the putty or the sash. Is that the truth or a myth?
Now, Stacy, that's a tough question, isn't it? Okay. It's like a lightning rod. You don't know whether they work or not. You just know that the building burned down or it didn't or got hit by lightning. I've never had, I will take a 4-inch sheetrock knife, hold on that edge and scrape that paint sometimes if it's not completely level like I want it. And I have never had it fail. Never. Okay. But I am a firm believer on that paint over onto the glass.
Sure.
You know, a 16th or 32nd on the glass. Okay. That paint on the glass is more important to me than a sight line. It's a compromise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I understand, because I'm a painter, I understand when you cut that paint on the glass, you've created a blunt edge, which, although it's a teeny weeny little blunt edge, that little blunt edge will hold moisture. Okay. And I understand the whole concept. I've never had failure because of that.
Good to know. I also think from common sense in my mind, I don't know, I guess I'm calling it common sense. Maybe that's not, maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but I'm thinking if we're scraping and pushing paint back towards the glazing putty, then that feels like it would compromise. But I feel like cutting a line and scraping away from the glazing putty, it makes more sense that might not be as hard on that edge, but
you need to understand with me, I've been painting over 50 years and I'm a pretty good window painter. Okay. I very seldom have to scrape paint away. My friend in Buffalo, I go in his shop now and then and I look at his work that's going out, and I think he does a neater job than I do, but I look at it as a painter, and what's good enough is good enough. I don't think it should have to be perfect. I don't think a window painted should have to look like a machine did it.
Right. Yeah. And I should say that I'm actually agreeing with you. I'm totally agreeing with you. I understand what you're saying. And I think so too.
And there's one more thing that goes back to an earlier question.
Okay.
What can I say about painting? For goodness sake, folks, thin your paint. It's too thick. You don't want your paint to look like corduroy. The real term is ropiness. You don't want that, whether it's primer or oil or latex. They all say do not thin. Generally, oil paints say do not thin because they don't want you to break the VOC rules, not because they don't need to be thinned. I thin everything. That means usually one extra coat.
I've gotten into the habit of that too, and I don't know what you use. I mean, we don't have to talk about specific products, but I usually just use the two additives. That one's for oil-based, one's for, I think I use Floetrol and Penetrol.
For waterborne paints, I use either the additive like Floetrol plus a little water maybe. And with oil-based paints, I typically just use paint thinner. Okay. On occasions, I might use Penetrol.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So this is a different question. It's not actually a question that somebody asked me, but it's a question I have for you. So I'm told that you have pretty strong feelings about using the word sash versus sashes. Can you elaborate?
Well, I wrote about it in my book.
That's what I heard.
And I have acquiesced against what I believe, sort of. I reviewed the word sash in probably 20 dictionaries. I reviewed it everywhere. And I even called, I'm sorry, I can't think of her name. There's an architect over in the Hudson Valley who inspected the windows at the White House. Okay. I called her. What do you think? And we all think that sash is the plural or means more than one sash. Okay. But it gets confusing in your writing. And for the general public, I say sashes more often than not, just for the clarity of it. And every now and then someone will point out sashes is inappropriate.
It's like, that came from me.
But it's a French word from chaussure, I think. And I think sash is both singular, like deer. Okay. Singular and plural.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Somebody asked me about that recently, and I didn't know that this was even a thing. So I said, well, if I have one sash, it's a sash. If I have more than one, it's sashes. But if I'm fixing a lot of windows, I'm just fixing sash, not sashes.
You know, another word in this business that's confusing is glazing.
Right.
Glazing can be a noun or a verb, or is used that way. It can mean the glass. It can mean the work of glazing. It can mean the putty. And I grew up that glazing compound was putty. And then I moved north and the painters would correct me, no, that's glazing compound. But all of the books in the 19th century called it putty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think glazing compound is a 20th century word.
I get called out on everything. So I was calling it glazing and glazing putty. And yeah, I got called out on that. Oh, you're calling it the wrong thing. And I thought, well, do you know what I'm talking about? They said, yeah. And I said, so you understood, right?
Yeah.
We're clear on that. We've got some information we just exchanged and you know what anyway, I didn't say that. But yeah, I get called out on everything. It's very interesting.
Okay.
It's fine. I think it's worth people sending me messages to make sure that they're understanding. I think that's certainly appropriate. Yeah, definitely. All right. So I just have a few more questions about that people ask me. What are your thoughts on mid-century wood windows? Are they worth repairing? Now, I don't know. I didn't get any real specifics on this. I assume they were talking about wood windows. I have some familiarity with single pane aluminum, and I have my own feelings about those. But let's just say they're mid-century wood windows.
Wood windows.
Yes.
Okay. I look at a lot of them, and I have restored and repaired a lot of them. Generally, I think they are worth repairing. Okay. The windows after World War II usually didn't have cords. They usually had like the Caldwell spiral balances or 100 other different spring balances, and those can usually be repaired with Caldwell spiral balances. There were a lot of balances that don't exist anymore, and if there's no way to put something new in there economically, it may be better to replace the window. But I've worked on a lot of mid-century Pella, Anderson, and Anderson windows that were in great shape. One of the problems with mid-century windows was that they were introduced at the same time aluminum storm windows were introduced. So as soon as aluminum storm windows were introduced and there was no longer the switcheroo between the wood screen and the wood storm, then the windows don't get inspected anymore. John, the neighbor who does the switch, doesn't say to Mary, the homeowner, your windows look really bad. And so what you will have is 50 or 60 or 70 years of no maintenance on the window.
Right.
And a homeowner will look at that and go, boy, this window's not worth keeping. But generally they are. Now, they don't have old growth wood, but they were treated with toxic preservatives that prevent them from rotting.
Right.
Generally PCP, which was pentachlorophenol. Okay, it's a highly toxic material, but boy, it protected the wood.
Right.
I will say that I see things now and then that make me tell a homeowner to replace them. Sometimes the hinges on old Pellas and Anderson windows or the hardware is missing, and can't get it anymore. What Anderson, especially the Pella hardware, you just can't get it. With Anderson, they've done a business model that's very aggravating to me. And when I started repairing windows 20 years ago, an Anderson crank for a 1950 or early 1960 window was $37.
Wow.
Okay, that's about $150 now. And it's being made in China for $3. All right. And I think they do that on purpose to push you to a new window. Wow, I'm not going to spend $150 on an operator and crank.
Right.
So you buy a new window. That aggravates me.
I'm sure we could make a whole show about all of that.
Yes, and I see them on the curb. I'll stop. Does it still work? And if it works, I pull it off.
All right. The next question is, what is the best way to remove the rust and get a press fit pulley that's locked up tight moving again? So I'm familiar with all of mine are press fit. So generally speaking, and this question isn't from me, but I would do everything I could in my power not to remove a press fit pulley. Now, if it were screw in, I would do it.
I remove a lot of screw in. Early when I started, I tried to remove the press fits out, and you ruin them. They're not going to come out. And then you ruin the hole too. Okay.
Exactly.
So then you have to recut the hole for a new pulley. I just did this. All right. And here's what I did. I heat gunned all the paint around the little case, heat gunned all that I could get off. Then I put stripper on it, and I can clean them up. Where the problem lies is if there's paint on the sheath, the round part that goes around and around. That's tough. And you can actually take a drill with a grinder with a wire.
Like a brush,
and you can clean that thing off. Okay. It'll go around, and you may have to limit how fast it goes around. But you can clean that off. Okay. You don't want to clean it. I know this. You don't want to clean it off with stripper on it because it's going to blow it all over you and all over the room. Okay, but that will work. Okay, and of course you need to be very careful when you use one of those wire brushes because they blow little wires out. And you got to have eye
protection for sure.
But that will work.
All right. Will that work for rust as well?
Yeah.
And then what do you lubricate the pulleys with?
I do. If the pulleys are in good shape, I always squirt WD-40 into a pulley. Okay, I always do. But if the pulleys have problems, they're not rolling very well, I'll follow that up with lithium grease. And now, you know what? That's one of those arguments that if you go onto a Facebook site and you open that up, you'll get 100 opinions about whether lithium grease is appropriate or not. You use a little tube that comes with the can. Other people will say, "Oh, no, lithium gets hard and there's better ones." But I don't know. I think that's a tedious issue, and I just use it.
There's arguments against WD-40 too, and it's the same thing. I agree with
Absolutely.
the tedious
Absolutely.
arguments. I can't abide after a while.
You're repairing your windows. You're doing the best you can to make them work for another 100 years. I don't want to argue about that.
Right. So the screw-in pulleys, if you can take those out and then you could actually do a little bit more to those, what would you soak those in is there anything you would do?
I cook them in my crock pot.
Right. To get the paint off. Sure.
I cook them on low overnight with a little detergent, and paint sometimes comes off easily and sometimes I have to work at it, but I use a brass brush, okay, to clean them off. And then I have in my workshop a bench grinder, and then a bench grinder equipped with wire wheels, and I use the wire wheels. So now I don't use a wire wheel if they're brass, okay, but if they're steel, the wire wheel won't hurt it. So I clean them with that, and then I usually put some sort of something like water locks or Watco clear oil on some kind of oil, let it dry.
Yeah. Good to know.
Or you can paint them again if you want to, but just the case, not the wheel, because a lot of them came black and then they were painted.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Wonderful. All right. Next question is, should we paint the backside of the meeting rails? Where the upper and lower rest together. Of course you understand. I guess I feel like I should make a clarification for anybody who's listening, just in case.
It's interesting. Even when I do the most basic window tune-up, which means I pull the sash and put new cords on, I clean off the meeting rails, all right, because you always have paint drips between the two, which means when you lock, you don't really have a good weather seal anymore. I think in the best of all possible worlds that you wouldn't paint the two parts of the meeting rail. But in the best of all possible worlds, we don't paint the jambs either, okay? But very few people do that. My customers don't want that; they want them painted. So I usually paint. All right. There's a little bit of an issue there, though. We don't need to get in this, but it's latex paint blocking. And if you put a cheap and low quality paint on the two meeting rails and you pull them together with a lock, they'll stick together, and that's an issue. Normally, about half the windows I work on have the zinc integral weather strips, and so there's a
interlocking, sure.
Interlocking mechanism there.
What about something like spar urethane instead of paint, in lieu of paint?
I think that's great.
Okay. All right.
I think it's a great way to do it.
All right. And the last question from Instagram is, what are your thoughts on steam boxes for paint and glazing putty removal? Okay.
I have the very expensive proprietary steam box from Mark Bagala up in Maine. I bought it 7 or 8 years ago, and I bought mine used. Those cost $7,000 or $8,000, and I bought mine for half that. It's the greatest tool I have ever owned. I cannot imagine doing what I do without it. Okay. That said, you don't have to spend that kind of money on one. You can make what they call the poor man's steam box. If you have 2 or 3 windows, then maybe you don't want to go to that much trouble. But if you have a whole house full of windows, you can make a steam box just the size you need for that. I find the steam box invaluable for removing old putty. I don't take off much paint with the steam box unless there are excessive layers of modern latex paint, and I will scrape all that off from the steam.
Okay. All right. Well, those are all the questions I have from Instagram. So But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about before we wrap for today is that you are currently writing a book that I'm very excited about, and it is called Storm Windows, A Comprehensive Guide to Wood, Wood Combination, Aluminum, and Interior Storm Windows. And I would love to know when that is going to be available for purchase.
Well, guess what? Today at 3:30, I'm having my final meeting with my editor and layout, my graphic design person, and the next step will be choosing a printer. Okay. So I think in a month to 6 weeks, it will be ready.
That is so exciting. I'll tell you what, of all the things, I feel like we're doing a really good job across the board of getting education out about sash windows and casements and doing it. But storm windows tend to be a confounding mystery for so many people. Yeah. Sometimes they misunderstand, we don't need storm windows anymore. If I restore my windows, I get a lot of messages, we heard we should restore our windows, so we took the storms off and now we've done the sashes. And I'm like, no, wait, you have to keep those. Even if they're not good, you need that as part of your two-part system. So I think this book is going to be really helpful to people moving forward.
I hope so. I think it will have a wider appeal in the Window Sash Bible. Very few homeowners are actually going to tackle a window restoration. But buying a storm window is confusing. And that's the question I'm asked more than any other question. What kind of storm window should I buy? And a wood storm window is custom made, but when it's an aluminum one, they want a brand. I'm not going to recommend a brand, okay? I'm just laying out all the information and you choose it, okay? So I'm laying out the information about old-fashioned or traditional wood storms and screens. And then, to me, the best of all possible worlds is the combination wood storm window where the frame stays in the window, okay? And then aluminum, there are high-end and low-end aluminum storm windows. And then interior storms,
right? Okay,
my last chapter. And I'm including a very short section on temporary measures like shrink film and that sort of thing, okay?
Oh, that's wonderful. I am not kidding when I say I'm very excited about it. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to own a copy of it. It's going to be great. But in the meantime, I wondered if you would be willing to sign a copy of your book, The Sash Bible, so that I could give one away to one of my listeners.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I've got a fresh box in my front hall, and you send me the address. How are you going to choose someone?
Well, I'm going to put it on the website. So I was going to say, for everyone listening, you can win a copy of the Sash Bible signed by Steve, and I'm going to post all those details about the giveaway on truetalesfromoldhouses.com/giveaway. And there won't be a purchase required, no strings attached. I just want to get this wonderful resource into someone's hands. So I'll have... Yeah, and I'll let you know, and I'll have all the details for listeners again at truetalesfromoldhouses.com/giveaway.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah, very exciting. All right. So let's tell people where they can find you. So they can find your book if they don't win the giveaway at thesashbible.com. Is that correct?
It's windowsashbible.com.
I'm glad I asked you. Okay, so let's try that again.
windowsashbible.com.
Okay, perfect. And I'm going to put all this on the show notes too. So if anybody forgets or if, they hear my error and get confused, it's going to be on the show notes as well.
And then this new storm window book, it'll have a link to that same site. I haven't set it up yet. That's next week.
One day at a time. And that's great. But when it's available, you'll let me know and I'll make an announcement too, because I do think it's going to be really useful for everyone for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Steve. I really enjoyed our conversation. And like I said, you are a legend. So this was very exciting for me. And I think everybody's going to love it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is a big day. I get to do this with you. I get to get my final meeting on my next book. Big day.
Big day. Great. Well, good luck. I hope you get lots of good news today about your book.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. The unsung heroes of True Tales from Old Houses are Nick and the crew from Mike Me, who do all of our sound tech, and Brendan and the team from Podpage, who keep the True Tales from Old Houses website up and running. Many thanks to my guests this season, Lane and Kevin Barry, Darren Cotton and Maddie Hamilton from the Tool Library, Scott Seidler, town historian Robert Galler, Natalie Jan Erickson, Karen Norwood, Ted Most, and Rob and Sue Cattell from Elfrith's Alley, Christine Tino, John Rogers and his son Ethan, Amy from Detroit, Michigan, Christopher Hewitt, and Steve Jordan. And thank you to Jason Shaw of Audionautics for all of our music. To continue the conversation, follow True Tales from Old Houses and Blake Hill House on Facebook and Instagram. And for more information about this episode, including show notes, transcripts, how to be a guest on an upcoming episode, the giveaway of the signed copy of the Sash Bible by Steve Jordan, the live recordings at Stony Ford in the Hudson Valley, and to sign up for the monthly newsletter, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com. I'll be back with a brand new show on Monday, September 13th. Until next time.